Before she arrived, my life moved with the predictability of sunrise over the plains. I owned the largest stretch of cattle land east of town. Not because I was ruthless, but because I was careful. I did not gamble. I did not drink beyond one glass. I did not trust easily, and I did not forgive twice. Men in town called me steady. Some called me cold. I never corrected them. Cold was useful. It kept negotiations clean. It kept arguments short. It kept enemies uncertain. Each morning, I rode the perimeter fence myself. Not because I needed to. I had men for that. But routine keeps a man sharp. It reminds him that land does not respect laziness. Neither do people. By noon, I was usually in town. The bank, the general store, the sheriff's office. My name carried weight in those rooms, though I never raised my voice. When disputes surfaced over grazing rights or unpaid debts, I settled them with documents, not threats. I believed systems mattered more than emotions. And I trusted 3 men. Thomas Reed, who handled supply shipments from the rail line. Sheriff Hale, who valued order above popularity. And Daniel Mercer, my closest business associate. Daniel and I had built most of what we owned together. He was the more sociable one, quick with a handshake, quick with a smile. Where I was reserved, he filled space easily. People preferred him at gatherings. They respected me in private. It worked. At least I thought it did. I had never been interested in marriage, not because I despised it, but because I saw what it did to men who were unprepared. They became distracted. Their judgment softened. Their decisions blurred by affection. I preferred clarity. Evenings were quiet. I read account books. Sometimes law texts I had ordered from back east. The house was large but orderly. No wasted noise. No unnecessary comfort. Everything had a purpose. There were times I noticed the silence, not painfully, just factually. Silence never argued with me. It never lied. When town gatherings occurred, I attended out of obligation. I stood near walls, listened more than I spoke. People mistook my restraint for arrogance. It did not trouble me. Reputation is a currency. You spend it carefully. If someone had told me then that one look would undo the balance I had spent years building, I would have dismissed it. I did not believe in sudden weakness. I believed in discipline, and discipline had never failed me. The town trusted me because I was predictable. Daniel trusted me because I was loyal, and I trusted him because he had never given me reason not to. That was my mistake. I believed consistency meant honesty. I believed control meant safety. I believed my heart was not something that could be moved without my permission. I was wrong. But at that time, I did not know that my calm life, my orderly, measured world, was already standing on fragile ground. It simply had not cracked yet. I first saw her on a Thursday evening. Daniel had insisted I attend the small gathering at the Mercantile. A shipment had arrived early. He said it was worth celebrating. I do not celebrate shipments, but I went. She was standing near the back window when I entered. Light from the setting sun fell across her shoulders. She was not dressed to impress. Simple fabric, no bright colors, yet the room felt arranged around her. Daniel was beside her. He introduced her as Miss Alina Whitmore. Her family had recently arrived from the east. They were looking to establish roots. He spoke for her more than she spoke for herself. When she finally looked at me, she did not smile immediately. She studied me, calmly. As if measuring something, I nodded. She returned the gesture. It should have ended there. But throughout the evening, I noticed small interruptions. Conversations paused when I approached. Daniel's hand lingered at her elbow a moment longer than necessary. She did not pull away. She also did not lean into it. Once, when she thought no one was watching, her expression changed. It was brief. Not fear, not exactly, but something restrained. I told myself I was imagining it. I had no practice reading such things. I read contracts. I read land surveys. I did not read women's faces. In the days that followed, her name surfaced often. Daniel mentioned assisting her family with temporary housing. The bank had extended credit for them. Sheriff Hale spoke of her father's misfortune back east, though he did not elaborate. It seemed generous, coordinated, efficient, too efficient. One afternoon, I passed Daniel's office unannounced. The door was slightly open. I heard voices inside Daniel's, controlled and low, hers softer. "I understand," she said. Understand what? I wondered. When I stepped inside, Daniel straightened immediately. Alina stepped back, creating distance between them. We discussed cattle pricing as though nothing had been interrupted. Daniel's tone was unchanged, professional, friendly, yet I felt something shift. At dinner that evening, Daniel spoke of her again, casually. As if testing my reaction, I gave him none. He smiled in a way I had not noticed before, subtle, knowing. I began seeing her in town more frequently, always near Daniel. always within reach of his presence. If she walked alone, it was brief. Someone from his circle seemed nearby. Once our paths crossed outside the bank, she looked as though she wanted to speak. Her lips parted slightly. Daniel's carriage turned the corner at that moment. She stepped back. "Good afternoon," she said instead. Her voice was steady. Mine was colder than usual when I replied. I told myself none of this concerned me. People arrived in town every year. Some stayed. Some did not. Yet I found myself noticing details I would normally ignore. The way Daniel spoke for her. The way she listened without interrupting. The way she seemed careful. Careful of what I did not know. Discomfort is a quiet thing. It does not shout. It settles into the edges of thought and waits. I tried to dismiss it, but it did not leave. The first clear sign came in the form of paper. I was reviewing quarterly cattle tallies in Daniel's office when I noticed a separate ledger on his desk. It was partially covered by correspondence, but the edge of Alina's surname caught my attention. Whitmore. I did not intend to pry. Curiosity is rarely profitable. Still, the numbers beneath her name were not small. There were columns marked advance, interest, and security. Security against what? When Daniel returned, he saw where my eyes had paused. He did not look alarmed. He simply closed the ledger and moved it aside. "Family debts," he said evenly. "Unfortunate situation back east." I nodded. That was explanation enough in most cases, yet something in his tone was rehearsed. Days later, I overheard Sheriff Hale speaking with the banker near the courthouse steps. They lowered their voices when I approached. I caught only fragments. "Arrangement already agreed. Best for her family. No other option given the amount." When they noticed me, the conversation shifted to grain tariffs. That was the second sign. The third came from Alina herself. I encountered her outside the church one afternoon. She stood alone, hands folded, gaze fixed on the horizon. There was wind that day, strong enough to lift dust from the road. "You are settling in?" I asked. She hesitated before answering. "As well as can be expected." It was a careful sentence. "Your family's affairs are stable?" I asked, more directly than usual. Her eyes moved toward Daniel's office across the street. "They are being handled." Handled, not resolved, not improved, handled. Before I could continue, Daniel stepped out as if summoned by the sound of her uncertainty. He placed a hand lightly at the center of her back. It was a gesture that appeared protective to observers. To me, it looked possessive. "She worries unnecessarily," he said, smiling at me. "Debt feels heavier than it is." Alina did not contradict him, but she did not confirm him either. That evening, I reviewed partnership documents between Daniel and myself. I found nothing irregular at first glance. Our investments were aligned as always, profits steady, supply routes intact. Then I noticed a clause added to a recent land acquisition, property adjacent to my eastern grazing fields. The Whitmore family name appeared again. Collateral. Daniel had secured their debt against land that bordered mine. If they defaulted, the property would transfer fully to him, which meant he would control the water access on that side. That was not coincidence. That was strategy. The realization settled slowly. Alina's arrival, her family's debt, the land position. The speed of approval from the bank and sheriff. This was not random misfortune. This was design. And for the first time in years, I felt something unfamiliar. Not anger. Not yet. But the quiet understanding that someone I trusted had begun moving pieces on a board I did not know we were playing on. I chose my words carefully when I brought it up. Daniel and I were alone in his office. Late afternoon. Light fading through the shutters. Account books open between us like neutral ground. "Whitmore land borders my eastern water line," I said. "I was not aware you had secured it as collateral." He did not look surprised. "It was necessary," he replied. "Their debt required assurance. You could have informed me." He leaned back in his chair, folding his hands behind his head, relaxed, almost amused. "I did not realize I needed permission to assist a struggling family." That was the first turn. "It is not permission," I said. "It is partnership." He smiled slightly. "You are reading tension where there is none." The sentence was gentle, dismissive without being hostile. "I heard mention of an arrangement," I continued, "at the courthouse." "People talk," he said. "You know how towns are." He stood and poured 2 glasses of whiskey. He handed me one, though he knew I rarely accepted. "You have always prided yourself on being logical," he added. "Do not let imagination disturb that." Imagination. The word stayed with me. Later that week, Sheriff Hale mentioned casually that Daniel and Alina were expected to announce an engagement. "It will stabilize her family's situation," Hale said. "A practical solution." "Was it her decision?" I asked. Hale studied me carefully. "You seem unusually concerned," he replied. Daniel has been generous. You of all men should respect a sensible arrangement. A sensible arrangement. When I finally spoke to Alina alone, I chose restraint again. Is this engagement voluntary? I asked quietly. Her posture stiffened. Why would it not be? Because debt is leverage. She looked at me for a long moment, not angry, not defensive. Then she said something that unsettled me more than any denial. You misunderstand the situation. I felt the room narrow. Then explain it. There is nothing to explain, she replied. You are seeing conflict where there is kindness. Kindness. The same tone Daniel had used, the same soft correction. I began noticing the pattern. Every concern I raised was reframed as overreaction. Every observation became misinterpretation. At the mercantile, Thomas Reed laughed when I questioned the land clause. You are not jealous, are you? He asked lightly. Jealous. The word struck harder than it should have. I had never been accused of emotional impulsiveness. My reputation rested on control. Now that reputation was being turned against me. You of all men falling into gossip, Thomas continued. I thought you were above sentiment. Above sentiment. The implication was clear. If I objected, I was compromised, irrational, threatened by something personal. Daniel began speaking more openly about the engagement in public spaces, always within my hearing. He watched my reactions closely, and when I gave him none, he smiled. Slowly, I understood what was happening. They were not arguing with my facts. They were undermining my credibility. If I pushed harder, I would appear unstable. If I stayed silent, the arrangement would proceed. And for the first time, I felt the edges of something dangerous. Not love, helplessness. The truth did not arrive dramatically. It came in fragments. 3 nights after the engagement was publicly announced, one of my ranch hands, Samuel, asked to speak with me privately. He was not a man prone to interference. He kept to livestock and silence. I was at the freight office, he said carefully. Heard Mr. Mercer arguing with the banker. About what? Interest rates. Said they needed to be adjusted before the wedding papers were finalized. Wedding papers? Adjusted how? I asked. Samuel hesitated. He said if the Whitmores refused to proceed, the full debt would be called in immediately. I felt something settle into place. Did Miss Whitmore hear this? I believe so. She was outside. That night, I requested access to public filing records under the pretense of reviewing land boundaries. Sheriff Hale allowed it without suspicion. The documents were legal, properly stamped. But when I traced the timeline, I saw it clearly. The Whitmore debt had been refinanced twice in 2 months. Each time the interest increased. Each time the collateral tightened. And the final clause was unmistakable. Upon marriage to Daniel Mercer, the debt would be considered, absorbed into joint holdings, and rendered settled. If the marriage did not occur, the property, including the Eastern Water Line, would default within 30 days. This was not assistance. This was pressure. I closed the file slowly. The system was intact, the paperwork legal, nothing forged, nothing illegal on its surface. But the structure was designed with only one survivable path: marriage. The following afternoon, I rode past the Whitmore residence. Alina stood outside alone, speaking with a delivery driver. When she noticed me, her composure faltered for a brief second. I dismounted. You know the terms, I said quietly. Her silence confirmed it. You are not obligated to accept them. Her eyes hardened, not with anger but resignation. My father signed what he believed was survival, she replied. Mr. Mercer offered time when no one else would. At a cost. Every solution has a cost, she said. And if you refuse, she held my gaze steadily, then my family loses everything, including the land beside yours. It was not an accusation. It was acknowledgement. You could contest the refinancing, I said. The timing suggests manipulation. And prove what? She asked. That a man with influence extended credit, that I agreed under pressure I cannot document. Her restraint was stronger than my frustration. This is not kindness, I said. No, she replied softly. It is leverage. There it was, spoken plainly. You deserve choice, I said. She almost smiled. Choice belongs to those without debt. When Daniel's carriage appeared at the end of the road, she stepped back again. Distance returned like a curtain closing. I mounted my horse without another word. The truth was now undeniable. Not a misunderstanding, not jealousy. A structured arrangement built on dependency. And I was standing at the edge of it, fully aware that interfering would not expose a crime. It would expose a system. One I had benefited from before I understood it. Once I knew, I could not unknow it. Daniel began moving faster. Within a week of the engagement announcement, invitations were printed. The ceremony would be held at the church near the town square. Sheriff Hale was to stand as witness. The banker would attend. Thomas Reed offered to host the reception at the Mercantile. It was coordinated, efficient, public. Every detail reinforced legitimacy. Meanwhile, my supply deliveries from the rail line were delayed twice without explanation. Thomas assured me it was a scheduling issue, yet Daniel's shipments arrived on time. When I raised the matter calmly, Thomas avoided my eyes. "You have always been patient," he said. "No need to create friction." Friction, that word again. Soon after, I received notice that the eastern grazing boundary would be reassessed due to shared water access review. The request had Daniel's signature beneath it. The review could reduce my herd capacity by nearly a quarter. It was procedural, legal, but it was timed precisely. I understood the message. If I challenged the marriage arrangement publicly, my business position could weaken quickly, quietly, without spectacle. Daniel visited my ranch one evening unannounced. He dismounted slowly, surveying the land with measured appreciation. "You built something remarkable," he said. "It would be unfortunate if tension disturbed it." "I have not created tension," I replied. He smiled faintly. "Perception can be as damaging as action." We stood facing each other, years of partnership between us. "You structured her debt," I said plainly. "I provided stability," he corrected. "You tied her family's survival to your name." I offered protection. The calmness in his voice was more unsettling than anger would have been. "She is not property," I said. "No," he agreed. "She is security." The honesty startled me. "You believe you are rescuing her," he continued. "But you are reacting emotionally. That is not like you." There it was again, emotional. "You are willing to jeopardize your ranch over a woman you barely know?" he asked. I did not answer. He stepped closer. "I have always admired your discipline," he said quietly. "Do not abandon it now." The implication was clear. Remain silent and everything continues smoothly. Interfere and consequences follow. After he left, I stood alone in the yard long after sunset. My men avoided approaching me. Word traveled quickly in towns like ours. The next morning, the banker requested a meeting regarding my loan restructuring options, unsolicited. Options implied vulnerability. The systems were aligning. Bank, sheriff, supply, land review, not through threats, through process. Daniel was not forcing me into a corner. He was narrowing the room gradually, and I began to understand something uncomfortable. For years, I had respected systems because they maintained order. Now I saw how easily order could be arranged to silence dissent. If I stepped forward, I would not be fighting a man. I would be challenging a structure that protected him. And structures do not react emotionally. They react methodically, just as I always had. I had never felt this helpless. The sun had barely risen when I walked the eastern fence line, replaying every detail I had discovered. Ledger entries, overheard conversations, legal filings, all pointing to one undeniable truth. Eliner's choice was an illusion. Daniel controlled the options. Systems I had trusted had been turned against me. For the first time, I realized that my restraint, the very thing I had relied on for decades, was powerless here. Patience, logic, and observation could not undo what had been meticulously arranged. I was trained to analyze contracts and cattle, but I was unprepared to navigate human leverage cloaked as assistance. I rode into town later that morning, seeking Eliner. I found her at the edge of the square, carrying a small bundle of letters. She did not flinch when I approached, but her hands tightened around the papers. "You know it's not fair," I said softly. Her eyes flicked toward the church, toward Daniel's office beyond it, then back to me. "Life rarely is." I swallowed the tight knot in my chest. I had always believed control could protect me. Now I understood control was an illusion in the presence of someone willing to manipulate systems quietly, methodically. I wanted to tell her that I could save her, that I would fight for her freedom, that her life need not be dictated by the debts and arrangements of men who valued leverage over kindness. But I also knew that fighting openly would risk Ev.